Hello Year 4, welcome back. Well, that was an upsetting chapter, wasn't it, that we've just heard? And I think Pip's feeling pretty upset at the moment. So he's decided that he wants to give the little bear, the one he feels really sorry for, his last apple. So at the end of the last chapter, he's just jumped over the wall and he's hurrying after the bears. Chapter 25. Pip pushed through the big wooden doors, steps outside and found himself at the back of the bear garden. Pedestrians hurried past. A black pig snuffled along the ground, searching for food. 3 ravens flew overhead. There was no sign of the bearkeeper, his dogs or his bears. Pip looked down at his feet. In the mud, he could see some scraps of fur and a few drops of blood. He followed them. The trail of blood and fur led across the grass, through some trees and down a dark alleyway. The alley narrowed between 2 ramshackle buildings. Here the trail stopped at a heavy wooden door. Pip turned the latch and gave the door a soft nudge, easing it open an inch or 2, just enough of a gap to see a muddy floor, some hay and a bucket. He waited for a few seconds, prepared to turn and run, but no one shouted at him, demanding to know what he wanted. Maybe the bearkeeper had gone. Maybe he was asleep. Only one way to find out. Pip glanced left, then right, then left again, making sure that the alley was empty and no one was watching, before swinging the door fully open and stepping inside. He found himself in a low-roofed building, like a cattle shed. The air stank. Puddles of brown water spread across the muddy floor. Taking care to make no noise, Pip closed the door behind him and padded quietly into the middle of the room, hopping over the puddles, turning his head constantly from side to side, looking and listening for the bearkeeper. A doorway in the far wall led into the rest of the building. It was covered by a thick woolen cloth, oatmeal coloured, put there to keep out draughts. 6 large cages stood against the near wall, built from wooden staves and lashed together with rope. 3 cages were empty and 3 contained bears. Pip walked along the line of cages, glancing first at Bruno, then the middle bear, but not stopping until he reached the smallest and skinniest of the bears. It was lying on the ground, curled in a heap, and showed no interest in him. Pip wrapped his hands around the bars of the cage and made a low whistle. So quiet, he could hardly hear it himself. The bear didn't even lift its head. Standing so close, Pip could clearly see the splotches of dried blood on the bear's flanks, matting together clumps of fur, and the flies buzzing round its wounds. A thick leather collar covered with scratches was tied around its neck. Pip whistled again, a little louder, but there was still no response. So he whispered, "What's your name?" He wasn't expecting a reply, knowing quite well that bears can't speak, but he hoped the bear might at least raise his head or look at him. His efforts were wasted. The bear stayed exactly where it was, slumped in the straw, its eyes averted, licking its wounds with its heavy pink tongue. With his left arm, Pip reached into his pocket, taking great care not to scare the bear with any sudden movements, grabbed the apple and passed it through the bars. The bear lifted its head and stared at the apple. Its nostrils twitched, its mouth opened. A long slither of saliva dribbled down from its lower jaw and dangled towards the ground. The bear struggled to its feet and, like a weary old woman, hobbled across the floor. Pip was scared, but he tried not to show it. He breathed calmly, not flinching, not even moving, just leaving his hand there, outstretched, clutching the apple. With both paws, the bears plucked the apple from Pip's hands and without even glancing at Pip, retreated to the back of the cage. The bear checked the apple from every angle, turning it over and over in its paws. Satisfied, the bear put the apple in its mouth and ate it in 2 quick gulps, then lolloped forward again. Pip was still feeling nervous and was tempted to jump backwards out of the bear's range, but he forced himself to stay exactly where he was, even when, gripping the bars of the cage with both paws, the bear hauled itself to its full height. The bear might have been shockingly small and skinny for a bear, but it was still much broader than Pip. The bear's mouth opened, revealing a long pink tongue and the brownish stumps of several teeth. Pip was almost too scared to breathe. If the bear felt vicious, it could chop off Pip's fingers or rip his arm right out of its socket. But the bear wasn't feeling vicious. Slowly, playfully, the bear stretched its right paw through the bars, placed it in the middle of Pip's chest, and gave him a push. Pip staggered backwards, tripped over his own feet and fell to the ground, landing in a puddle. Now, bears don't laugh, but Pip saw an expression on the bear's face which looked to him like a smile. Pip got up, walked back to the cage and slid his right arm through the bars. He knew he might be doing something very stupid, something that he might regret for many years to come, but it seemed a risk worth taking. He stretched his arm forward until he touched the bear's flank, and slowly and carefully he touched the bear's muzzle with the tips of his fingers. Then he stroked the bear's thick neck, feeling the layers of fat and fur. The boy and the bear looked at one another. There was a strange expression in the bear's big black eyes, something like sadness. They were more like the eyes of an owl than a fox or a dog, huge and dark, although lacking the serenity an owl has. Sadness wasn't the only expression that Pip could see in the bear's eyes. He could see fear too, and something else, something more surprising, intelligence. The bear's eyes were searching and inquisitive, trying to make sense of a mysterious world. Have you ever met someone for the first time and before you'd exchanged more than a couple of words, before you'd even had a chance to really look at one another properly, you've known instinctively that you could become best friends? It's a good feeling, isn't it? Well, that had never happened to Pip. He'd never had a real friend, a best friend, someone to whom he could confess everything, even his innermost secrets. But now, staring into the bear's eyes, he saw someone who could be his friend. He didn't know why, and he certainly didn't know how, but he wanted to be friends with this small, skinny bear. A dog barked. The bear shambled backwards. Another dog barked, and another, and then many more. Pip dropped his arm and turned around just in time to see several dogs pushing past the oatmeal-coloured curtain and rushing straight towards him. He backed against the wall, holding his hands in the air. "Oh, good dog," he said. "Please don't bite me." The dogs surrounded him, baring their sharp white teeth. Saliva dribbled from their jaws. If they attacked, they'd have ripped him apart, but they just pinned Pip against the wall, growling softly and waiting for their master. And there he was, the Bearkeeper. He stood in the doorway, his clothes looking as if they hadn't been changed for a year, and pointed his whip at Pip. "Who are you?" Pip's throat was dry. He couldn't speak or move. He was so scared of the dogs and the whip and their owner that his voice had left him. He could only open his mouth and blink his eyes like an idiot. The Bearkeeper advanced into the room. His breath stank of booze. Up close, he looked less vicious and more of a mess. He said, "Come on, boy, talk to me. What are you doing here?" Nothing, said Pip in a small voice. I just... And then his voice died again. "Lost, are you? Just wandered in? And you were about to wander out again, no doubt, taking a few of my possessions, you dirty little thief." The Bearkeeper raised his whip. The dogs growled. "What have you taken? Come on, confess. Out with it. Empty your pockets." "I'm not a thief," said Pip. "Well then, what are you doing here?" I'm just looking at the bears." "Why?" "I like them." The Bearkeeper laughed, his expression changing from fury to jolliness. "Well, fair enough," he said in a kindly voice. "Well, I like them too." And he lowered his whip to the ground. And following their master's cue, the dogs backed off. The two of them stood side by side for a moment, the man and the boy, as if there was a kind of secret bond between them, a shared fascination for bears. Pip didn't want to break the silence, but he was so eager for information that he couldn't hold back his questions. He pointed at the small, skinniest bear and he said, I like that one best. What's his name?" "Her," said the Bearkeeper. "What?" "Her name, not his name." Pip stared through the bars at the bear, who was huddling at the back of the cage. "She's a girl?" "Course she's a girl," said the Bearkeeper. "If she was a boy, do you really think she'd fight so badly? Useless scrap of a bear. Teach me never to buy another girl. But she was cheap, I'll say that much." What's wrong with her?" "Well, look at her. Look. What's not wrong with her? She's too small, no fire, no aggression. She can't fight to save her life. As soon as we have another delivery, a few more bears, well, we'll clear her right out." Pip stared at the bear. For some reason, although he didn't know why, he was amazed she was a girl. He didn't know many girls, just his sisters and a few farmers' daughters in the village, but the bear looked very different to them. He said, "When you get another delivery, what will you do with her?" "Well, what we do with all the old bears." And what's that?" "Kill her, give her flesh to the dogs and make a nice hat from the fur." And the Bearkeeper touched his shaved head. "I could use a new hat. I lost my last one. More likely some thief nicked it. One of your mates, maybe." Pip said, "When are you getting another delivery then?" "Not sure. Could be tomorrow. Should be a shipment from Russia any day now. That's what they've been saying for months. Useless, those Russians." And what's her name?" "That runt? Well, she doesn't have a name." "Why not?" "Bears don't have much use for names. I mean, they can't talk, can they?" "Well, Bruno has a name." "Well, he's different." "Well, what's different about him?" The Bearkeeper didn't have an answer to that question, so he said, "Didn't I tell you to go away? I don't have time for chit-chat. I'm a busy man. What are you doing here anyway?" Pip wasn't sure what to say. I mean, what was he doing in the Bearkeeper's home? "I'm looking for the weasel," he could have said, but the Bearkeeper wouldn't know what he was talking about. "I could tell him I've just arrived in London," thought Pip, "and I'm looking for someone. No, I don't even need to say that. I'll just tell him that I'm new to the city. Maybe he knows where I can stay. He might offer me some bread, even a piece of cheese." Perhaps the Bearkeeper needed an apprentice. Perhaps he'd give 2 meals a day to a boy who carried buckets and scrubbed floors and washed bears. Yes, thought Pip, that's a fine plan. While searching for the weasel and his father, he could stay here and tend the bears, feeding them, washing them, stroking their soft fur and tickling their ears and protecting them from the horrors of London. He said, "Please, sir, will you teach me to be a bearkeeper? Will you take me as your apprentice?" "This isn't a job for a boy," said the Bearkeeper. "Bears are vicious creatures, dogs too. You need strength." "I'm stronger than I look." "Even so, you're not half as strong as them." The Bearkeeper jerked his thumb towards the bears. "Even the smallest one's stronger than you. Stronger than me too. Give him a chance and one of those bears will knock your head off in a second." "I don't mind." "Well, you will when you don't have a head." "I'm a good worker," insisted Pip. "I get up early. Go on, sir. Give me a chance." The Bearkeeper shook his head. "Sorry, boy. I'm sure you can work hard, but I like being alone. I don't want an apprentice." "But I can—" "Go home," interrupted the Bearkeeper. "You'll find a job somewhere else. Bright boy like you. Ask around. You'll find work." "But I—" "Go home," said the Bearkeeper again. "I have things to do." "Please, sir, can't you—" "Are you deaf? I said go home." Pip tried to argue his case, showing off his hands and his muscles, promising to work for nothing more than board and lodging, begging to be given a chance, even if only for a day or two. But the Bearkeeper was not interested. He cracked his whip. Pip yelped and grabbed his ankle. The Bearkeeper took a step forward and flexed his whip again. Pip hopped backwards and said, "Can I come back and visit the bear, please?" "Visit? Why?" "I like her." Pip glanced at the bear, and she was crouching by the bars of her cage watching him, and their eyes met for a moment, and he turned back to the Bearkeeper and said, "Please, sir, let me come and see her. I won't do any harm, I promise. I'll just talk to her and bring her apples." "Well, if you want to see the bear, you know what you can do." "No, sir." "You can pay a penny and watch her fight my dogs. That's what everyone else has to do." "Couldn't I just come here and—" "You're never coming here again," interrupted the Bearkeeper. "This is my home. If I catch you in here, I'll kill you, and that's a promise." And he raised his whip. "Now get out." Pip realised there was no point arguing, not unless he wanted bleeding ankles. He would have liked to stroke the bear's fur again, say a proper goodbye, but the Bearkeeper was already cracking his whip. Just in time, Pip sprang backwards and sprinted out of the shed. Wonder what Pip's going to do now. Do you think he'll give up trying to see the little bear? Or do you think he'll try and get back in the Bearkeeper's cottage? Listen up for the next chapter and you might find out. Bye for now, Year 4.